The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Tasty Minstrel Games, Arcane Wonders, Game Toppers, hitting on 16, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the Gateway City, St. Louis, Missouri, it's The Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and occasionally role-playing games. Today, the Dukes recap all of the news out of GAMA, including some recent plays. Then they'll review Blackout Hong Kong from Eggert Spiele. And now, The Dukes of Dice.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And Alex.
And Alex, take it from here.
Why?
Because I don't have the show notes in front of me.
Oh, hey, this is episode 197, which we're calling Reno 999. That name provided to us from BJ from Board Game Gumbo. If you want to provide a name suggestion for future Dukes of Dice episodes, you can do that on our guild number 2008. Of course, we'll get you the rest of the top 6 names at the very end of the show. How'd I do, Sean?
Well, you didn't explain what the title meant.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Reno 999. So, GAMA was...
It's hard.
It's hard. It's a hard gig. There's no doubt. Reno is where GAMA was at, where I was at this past week, and 999 is the emergency number in Hong Kong. So, a nice combination and a nice reference to a TV show that I saw a couple episodes of. Did you?
Oh, I saw all of Reno 911. Watched the movie.
There's
Good
a
times.
movie?
Yeah, there's a movie. Yeah, they were that whole crew. Like they did stuff with the State. Did you ever see the State? Was it the State? Is that what it was called on MTV back in the day?
I have
no idea. It was a sketch comedy show.
Nope, no idea.
And then a bunch of them were part of Wet Hot American Summer nonsense.
I see.
Have you seen Wet Hot American Summer?
No.
Oh my goodness.
You already know this. You knew that before you asked that question.
You should make an effort to see it. It is absurdist.
Okay.
And Paul Rudd has the most incredible scene where he's picking up trash, and it is just so annoying to him. Paul Rudd, I think, is a living god because he doesn't age, and he's really funny.
Is he that funny?
Yeah, he's really funny. Paul Rudd's great. He's fantastic.
Is he that funny though?
Well, you haven't seen Wet Hot American Summer. So anyway, how you doing, Alex?
I'm doing well. Today is National Macaroon Day, the day we're recording this. So happy National Macaroon Day to you, Sean.
Thank you. Maybe I'll have Mariah make up some of her famous lavender macaroons.
Okay. So
which they're terrible, by the way. And I'm not being mean when I say that. They are, in fact, terrible. And Mariah has admitted that the lavender was a mistake.
I see.
Because it was like eating soap.
Ooh, yeah. Not good. So these macaroons that I went out and got with Abby, my girlfriend, were fantastic. Fantastic macaroons. There's a place called La Patisserie Choquette about a 5-minute drive from our house that had 50 different flavors, including some really fantastic ones and some really weird ones. I had a Cheetos macaroon this morning that was surprisingly delicious. Yeah, Cheetos macaroon. There was a proposal in front of us in line. There were people in wigs. It was quite the scene at this place. It took, in total, about an hour and 45 minutes from the time we left our house to the time we returned back with the macaroons. And we got there a half hour before they opened their doors. So they got macaroon fever here in St. Louis, Sean.
Little known fact, macaroons were named for, do you know, Alex?
I do not know.
Current French President Emmanuel Macaron.
No, that's inaccurate. Incorrect. Hey kids, if you're listening, don't take Sean's advice on history or facts.
Hey, I used to be a social studies teacher, Alex.
Okay.
Come on.
All right.
So I should say real quick that I'm a little hamstrung because my computer is decided to start updating right before we started recording. So we're actually we're doing Google Hangouts on my phone, and I don't have show notes or I can't look stuff up on the fly. So we're kind of winging it here.
And I'm kind of hamstrung because the Blues hockey game starts in about 15 minutes, and I may or may not end up watching in a little side view window.
Wow.
I mean, we both have equal problems here, Sean.
Wow. All right, this is going to be a fun episode.
It is going to be a fun episode. Don't worry, I'm in charge.
It's in theory a short one.
I'm gonna be steering this ship here, Sean. So
okay.
I'm gonna steer it away from rocks and towards adventure. Anyway.
Cool.
What have you been playing lately, Sean?
Okay, so, I need to look up on my phone because I didn't put it ahead of time in the show notes. Okay, I'll do this instead. I will talk about some digital plays, which may or may not include Magic as well.
Oh, boy.
What do you think? Will I be talking about Magic?
How many different times can you talk about, like, what else is there to talk about?
Well, there's quite a few, and it's actually quite disturbing. So a couple things. Castles of Burgundy app just came out like a week or so ago.
Ooh.
Have you had a chance to play that
Does it have
yet,
solo
Alex?
play?
Yes. I mean, you can play against the AI.
Yeah, good. It has AI.
Is that what you mean?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's good. It's really good. The interface is good. It is not like a straight port of the board game in the sense of like the layout, which I'm fine with that when board game apps do that. And I think it works really well. The only issue I have are animations between each action kind of take a while. So that's a little annoying. It's not terrible, and hopefully they'll do something to either speed that up or eliminate it or whatever. But yeah, I've played it twice so far, and I'm really enjoying it. I love Castles of Burgundy, and I always like playing it in a digital form because I've played it like online with, I think Bois de Jeu has it and Board Game Arena has it. But now just being able to play against the AI is pretty cool. Also, I downloaded on Steam the Scythe board game.
Oh, okay.
Which is a pretty interesting implementation. It is, so the implementation or the user interface, I think, is a little bit clunky. Not bad, but I understand why. I understand why it's as clunky as it is, and it's not. There's certain aspects of it that aren't intuitive. So, for example, when you are moving your mechs, and by the way, this is the Stonemaier game. That's one of a ducal favorite. When you're moving your mechs, or you're moving whatever, you have the option to pick up resources or mechs pick up workers or whatever. And so there's this interesting way that the interface does it. But it was easy to kind of click through that and forget to do it because you just do it so naturally when you're playing the board game. There is a nice like undo the turn feature, so when you forget to do it, you can fix it. I only played it once so far, and it was good. I'm happy to play again. I will say this, that on Wednesday night, Nick suggested we play Scythe, and having just played it online, I kind of turned it down. Ooh. Part of that was a function of what time it was. But also, I was like, well, I just kind of played it, so I felt like I had my Scythe fix. And my exact comment to Nick was, well, I think if I'm going to play Scythe, I want to play the Fenris Legacy expansion, if we're going to do that. So, but interesting implementation, and I'll certainly be playing it some more when I can find the time, Alex, because the little time I have to game at home is being taken up by Magic the Gathering, as you know, as I've discussed numerous times on the podcast, because of this little thing called Magic Arena, which is a great new online way to play. I'm not going to talk about that because I've talked about that. But as I've been playing more, I've also been watching more YouTube content of Magic streamers, including one of my favorite pro players, Luis Scott Vargas, who I think he runs channelfireball.com. And he's just a fantastic player. And I was watching his stream of vintage Magic. So Alex, are you familiar with the vintage format?
Absolutely not. You knew that the answer to that question before you asked it.
I know.
Which I hear is what a good lawyer should always do.
Oh, absolutely. You never want to ask a question you don't know the answer to.
Yep.
Whew. Anyway, so there's the standard format, which is basically the two most recent years. Modern format goes back 10, 15 years. There's the legacy format, which is all of the card pool, except for some certain banned cards. And then vintage is basically everything, including restricted cards like the Power 9. So your Black Lotus, your different Moxes, Ancestral Recall, Time Vault, Time Walk, etc. So I was watching some vintage plays online, and I'm like, man, I really want to play vintage. And I said to myself, boy, I have a pretty sizable collection of modern cards on Magic the Gathering online. And my account has just been sitting there for years. I'd played off and on for 10 years online. And so I started playing Magic the Gathering online again. Again, this is different than Magic the Gathering Arena. So it's two different platforms, but this has a huge card pool. And because of the collection already built on there, it was relatively inexpensive for me to build an updated modern deck and to build a vintage deck, which is pretty nuts. So like if you want to build a vintage deck in real life, it would cost you like $20,000. Can you wrap your head around that? Isn't that insane?
It's insane. And yet I have a story that I'll tell during my Gamma recap that makes it feel less insane, maybe.
Okay. Well, so the cool thing on Magic the Gathering Online is they've printed, quote unquote, the Black Lotuses, the Moxes, and they're dirt cheap. They're like, I think it was like $10 for a Black Lotus and like $4 for the Lotuses or for the Moxes. So you can actually build and play vintage really cheaply on Magic the Gathering Online.
Now, wait,
relatively speaking.
Yeah, I was going to say cheaply, meaning how much per deck instead of $20,000 per deck?
Okay, sure. So a vintage deck, if you were all in, they had to buy everything from the get-go, is about $400.
That's not. Are you kidding me?
Compared to $20,000.
Oh my God! Yes, your digital version of this thing is a lot cheaper.
Well, keep in mind a couple things. So number one, I didn't buy decks outright because again, I've had a collection over the years because I used to draft a lot on Magic the Gathering Online, and I've been incrementally building up decks. Like I had five or six modern decks from about 6 years ago that I just had to update. But also, unlike Magic the Gathering Arena, like in Magic the Gathering Online, MTGO, you can cash out. Like you can sell your stuff to online vendors and cash out your collection. Whereas in Arena, you cannot.
Okay.
So that being said, and I had this conversation with Nick, our buddy Nick over at Empire, and what I'm paying for in a lot of ways is the opportunity to do these things. Because these are things I would want to do, but I don't have time to go to our local magic shop or any of our local magic shops and play in tournaments and do those things. So I'm paying for this increased opportunity. And I really do think there's value to that. Like I'm getting sizable enjoyment out of playing modern. So I'm playing this Amulet Titan deck, which is this green ramp deck, and I play these Primeval Titans. Whenever they come into play or whenever they attack, I get to grab 2 lands from my library and put them directly into play. It's really cool. And then I'm playing Dredge in Magic or in Vintage. So Dredge is really interesting. It's a deck where you produce pretty much no mana all game, and you have 1 land that you play, and it produces no mana itself, and it completely circumvents the normal rules of the game and lets you just recur cards from your graveyard. You intentionally are putting cards into your graveyard from your library, and the synergies lets you just like pop things out of your graveyard directly into play, and you just win, and it's fun. So I'm off the deep end, Alex.
Yeah, no doubt. You are swimming with the sharks for sure.
But I'm enjoying it, Alex, and isn't that what's important?
I'm happy you're living your best life, Sean. I'm happy for you.
Something like that. I will say too that Nick and I did play some Magic over at Duke's Dice game night on Wednesday night. I brought some of my Pauper decks. So this is paper Magic, right? Real Magic. I brought some of my Pauper decks, which are all commons, which is a pretty cool format. And then he brought his 1998 championship decks, which are these gold bordered decks. The cards aren't tournament legal, but they're basically a recreation of the top 8 decks from the Pro Tour or from the World Championships that year. And so it was fun to play these. And again, if it had been an actual copy of these decks, they would have been like $1,000 to $2,000. But yeah, it was fun. So I'm enjoying Magic, and I'm sticking to it.
I'll tell this story now because it doesn't necessarily fit into the rest of Gamma coverage. But during the course of the trip out to Reno, I did play a good amount of blackjack. I was up 115 the first night, up another 125 the second night, and then down almost 100 the third night. So I ended up doing pretty well, but certainly not setting the world on fire. That second night, there was a gentleman at my table who was a board game store owner from Kentucky, but his specialty was flying out and paying in cash people for their vintage collections and then reselling them on eBay.
Oh,
yeah. He was a very interesting guy. He would continually flout the rules that they had. So they'd be like, well, you can only have one hand on the card. So he'd be like tossing them back and forth between his two hands. Not for any real legitimate gameplay reason, just cause. But he was telling all sorts of stories, including how he makes the claim that he has put in his will that all of his finances, everything he has when he dies, will be inherited by his Bengal cat. Not Bengal tiger, but a Bengal cat.
Huh.
He's also currently researching city zoning codes to see if he's able to buy a giraffe and then just have a giraffe. So he was an interesting guy. There's no doubt about it. Anyway, that's why I can buy into this whole fly around the country, pay a ton of money for Magic the Gathering stuff.
Well, now I have something to aspire to, Alex.
Yes. Someday you too can be as funky and strange as that gentleman. Anyway.
I want a battle giraffe.
You want a battle giraffe?
Yeah, I'll put it in armor, and I'll just ride it around with a sweet lance.
This is not meant to be an intentional plug, but I will say in a game that Monochromatic Wolf has coming to Kickstarter on Tuesday, one of the factions does include a battle giraffe.
Does it really?
Yes, it does.
Oh. Well, that was not planned.
No, but yeah, battle giraffe. Anyway, hey, let me talk about a game. Let me talk about a game I played while I was at GAMA. It's one that's already been released, but had completely not been on my radar, which is odd because it's designed by Wolfgang Warsch, the designer behind Ganz Schön Clever, Doppelt so Clever, Quacks of Quedlinburg, The Mind. This is a game called Illusion. Sean, have you played or heard of Illusion?
I've heard about it, and I feel like we had mentioned it in news or something at one point.
It came out, so I was talking to the folks at Pandasaurus who have this here in the U.S. about it, and they said it came out the same time as The Mind, but it was one that didn't get the same degree of attention because, well, The Mind. This is a very simple little card game, comes with, I think, maybe 100 cards in total, and the cards themselves are all optical illusions, or meant to be things that are hard to necessarily pick up. Some of them are just letters. The gist of the game is you're supposed to try and guess what percentage of a certain color is on there. So let's say in this certain round you're playing with green. You're trying to guess on this card what percentage of this card is green versus the next card of the deck. The next person has to say if it's higher or lower. The person after that has to put it in its proper place, and so on and so forth until you have this chain of cards, in theory, in ascending order from lowest to highest, in what percentage of the front of the card is green. And at some point, someone can make a challenge and say, I think this is not correct. What's out here has been screwed up. And if they're right, they get a point. And if not, I think the most recent player who placed gets a point. And that's the entire game. But it's really fun, really satisfying. I had not heard, but apparently this was Tom Vassel's favorite card game of last year. Yeah. Really simple, perfect filler. This is certainly not a full sit-down kind of game. This is something you can play through in maybe 15, 20 minutes at most. But
so how do you verify correctness?
So good point. On the back of the card, it has percentages for each of the four colors, for red, blue, yellow, green. It has a percentage number, and all of those numbers are different from one another, obviously. So there will never be a tie. There is going to be an exact correct answer.
I see.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like timelines, but with color awareness.
Yes, yeah, with kind of trying to pick out by the face of a card what percentage is on there. And in thinking about it, maybe they aren't all 100% unique numbers, but I don't know. They're usually, we didn't run into any situations where there were ties. So, yeah, that's Illusion. It's one that is really hard to find because I went to go Insta-buy this afterwards. Amazon, I couldn't find any except for marked up used copies. I did find, at the time I bought it, 5 in stock from Walmart.com, weirdly enough. So I have a copy coming here to me. It was an Insta-buy game. And Wolfgang Warsch, I think, is an absolute genius. So that's Illusion. Back to you, Sean.
Okay. Well, I got to play a fairly light game, maybe a gateway game along the lines of Splendor, maybe a little bit heavier than Splendor. It's called Ganymede, and it's published by Sorry, We're French. That's the name of the publisher. Sorry, we're French.
Our bad.
Yeah. And it's an interesting little game. And it's a bunch of little micro actions that you're building up over time. Little bit of an engine building aspect. Basically, you are trying to get colonists, different color meeples, from Earth to Mars, and then to these, I guess they're generation ships that are going out to seed the galaxy. And to do that, you're going to be selecting a card from one of 3 rows. So there's a row of cards that are kind of the seed cards. They'll get you the different color workers to let you put them on Earth. Then there are the Earth cards, which will give you actions that let you move your workers is the wrong term. Colonists from Earth to Mars. Then there's the Mars cards, which will let you move them from Mars to one of the 2 ships that you have out. And then also the ships are another deck that you're not being able to choose from as a regular action, although certain actions will let you choose from them. These ship cards give you endgame points based on various factors. And depending where you put the ship will either require 3 of the same colonists, so 3 of the same color, or 1 of each, which has some interesting implications for what those particular colonies are going to look like, I think, from a thematic point of view, once they get to their destination. So anyway, it was interesting because, like I said, there's an engine building aspect, because as you take certain cards, they're in a certain color class, which may give you bonus actions if you load up on them. But there's also like an auto launch a ship if you collect a card of all, I think it's 6, maybe it's 5 different colors. And so an auto launch is pretty important, because the object of the game is to have the most points, but the game end triggers when someone has launched 4 ships. And so really, in that respect, it's kind of a race game, because if you're the first to launch 4 ships, and assuming no one else is able to launch any ships in that last final round, there's a pretty good shot that you will win. This was interesting, but ultimately just okay. I think Splendor is probably a far better game. This was a little bit, like I said, a little bit more complex than Splendor, not by much, but I think that what it added in complexity, the elegance that it lost, really made this not stand out quite as much. And there are a lot of things, like I like the theme, the art on it is beautiful. These are like really cool illustrations, but it kind of fell flat for me. And if I'm gonna play that weight of game, I'd rather play your Splendor or your Azul or Century Spice Road or whatever. So interesting, but it's kind of a pass for me and not much of a recommendation. So that is Ganymede from, sorry, we're French.
Sorry, not a good enough game, apparently. Man. Next one I'll talk about is one from another designer I'm quite fond of, a designer named Kane Klenko. This is a game being put out by Renegade called Proving Grounds, and it is part of a solo series of games. In Proving Grounds, I believe you've been accused of murder or something along those lines, and you are required by the laws of the country you're in, which seems to be kind of Roman-inspired, to fight your way out. If you fight and defeat 8 opponents in the Colosseum, you have won your freedom and you're free to go. So, Proving Grounds is not really similar to something like, say, Flip Ships, and is more similar to something like Fuse and Flatline, 2 games with real-time dice rolling. That is a hallmark mechanic of Kane Klenko games, and this one is absolutely that. It's a solo game where you are rolling dice and looking to get pairs or better. Because if you get pairs or better, it allows you to potentially move up against whatever opponent that number matches. So there's 6 opponents at any one time, each representing a number that you're rolling. So if I roll 2 6s and the person I am fighting needs 2+ dice in order to move up against, then great, that pair works great for me. However, if I have single dice at the end of the round where I'm rolling, single numbers, those count against me. Those count as wounds, them attacking me. And as you're rolling the dice, you're not allowed to re-roll dice that aren't paired. So I might have a pair of dice out there, but I might have, say, a 1, a 2, and a 3 that don't have matches. So I might want to re-roll my set of dice to try and get those matched up to not take wounds. Because if you have a pair and it doesn't happen to meet the requirement of the fighter you're going against, then nothing happens. You don't go up on the track, you don't go down on the track. The objective is to defeat 8 fighters before you die. There are other modules and little mini expansions built in to add more spice and add more flavor, but at the core of it, that's what the game is. And as a solo game goes, not bad. Not bad for a real-time dice chucker. Fairly simple mechanically, but it's, there are little twists in the game. Like, for instance, this person might have a special power that says you can't use a yellow dice or a blue dice against this fighter, or you need three paired up sixes, and one of them has to be yellow in order to move up against this fighter. Some of them have fewer hit points, some of them have more hit points, but the ones with fewer hit points tend to be more difficult. So yeah, beautiful art, nice game, nice little package, and I'm not sure what the price point is on this one MSRP wise, but my guess is it'll probably be a pretty satisfying little value. For some reason, solo and dice chucking seems to work for me, whereas solo and just cards doesn't always. Friday didn't work for me too well, but this one, yeah, I enjoyed. Might be one I'll pick up when it's available. That's Proving Grounds.
That's going to do it for what we played. Let's head on over to the news desk.
This week in news, hey, I was at GAMA. Sean, for the first time ever.
Oh, were you?
I was. It's in lovely Reno, Nevada. It is definitely an industry show, and it is, I will say, the schmooziest of shows I have ever been to. Easily the schmooziest. There was this restaurant called Biscotti's right outside of the main hall and right by registration, and it seemed like everyone was hanging out there. If you needed a meeting, hey, let's meet at Biscotti's. You want to just stand around and network for a little while? Hey, go by Biscotti's. And what's interesting is you don't even need a badge to really have that Biscotti's experience. You could show up as a non-industry person, just hang out by Biscotti's, and you would meet all sorts of fun folks. The James Ernest from Cheap Ass Games, and I don't know, a ton of designers. I ran into Keith Matejka from who did Role Player, and yeah, just any number of people. Tons of bigwigs and important industry folk schmoozing around and hearing about the latest. It's primarily retailer focused. It's primarily meant as a way for publishers to pitch to retailers and let them know, here's what's coming down the pipe. Get a chance to see it, experience it, and be there in person with it. So not your typical show that I would do where it's, you know, anyone who has a badge is in there and playing games or buying games or whatever else. This is buying games, but on a larger scale, I guess you would say. So what was nice about that, though, is it meant that I was able to play quite a few games at vendor booths because they have them out for demo and it's not super, super crowded. So I got in a number of plays that I'll talk about before we get into proper news, if that's all right with you, Sean Ramirez, attorney at law.
Let's do it.
So I got in a play of something. Now, to be clear, for full disclosure, this is a sponsor of the Dukes of Dice, Arcane Wonders. But I had seen this banner, and I wasn't super excited by this game. It was a game called Air, Land, and Sea. Have you heard about this game, Sean?
Yeah.
I had not heard about it, and the visual appearance of it did not excite me. The look of it did not excite me. But I played around with Tony from Arcane Wonders, and Sean, I need this game. I really wish he would have let me walk away with a demo copy. It's a really, really, really good two-player game. I really enjoyed this one. The gist of it is you have 3 theaters of battle, air, land, and sea. And you have cards in your hand like heavy artillery or a battleship or whatever else, or that just match up with any one of those 3 areas. And so you're allowed to play that card face up to the matching area. I can play the tanks to the land. I can play the boats to the sea. I can play the planes to the air. Or I can play any card in my hand face down. If I play the card face down, there are card effects that can later flip it, and whether it matches or not doesn't matter. So if I flip, say I play a 6 face down, I play my tanks in the sky, and that later gets flipped up by someone's card effect or my own card effect, all of a sudden I have flying tanks. I have 6 value flying tanks. Your objective you start off with a 6-card hand, a la, say, Baseball Highlights 2045, first mention, and you have to play those cards in a proper order in order to win the day, to win 2 of 3 different battlefields. If the round ends and you've won 2 out of 3 battlefields, congrats, you get a full 6 points. The winner of the game is the one who ultimately has 12. Now, there's a way to mitigate this, though. If at any time you feel during the battle that there's absolutely no way, no chance that you have to win this, you can choose to withdraw at any time. And the earlier in the round you withdraw, the fewer points your opponent gets. So let's say I withdraw with 3 or 4 cards left. My opponent might only get 3 or 4 points as a result of that. It's a really, really smart mechanic, really well done. And I'm a sucker for these kind of, you have a hand of these cards and the proper order you play them in is going to dictate whether you win the day. The effects play off of each other really well. I think it's something like an 18 card deck. So yeah, it is stellar. I really enjoyed this. And again, sponsor of the show, blah, blah, blah. But man, oh man, Air, Land, and Sea, I would keep an eye out for that one, especially if you liked a game like Fox in the Forest. Felt like the scoring system at least had kind of a sense of that to it. So, Air, Land, and Sea.
Cool.
That's the first one. They also had a game called Volcanic Isle there that I thought was going to be a twist on Downfall of Pompeii, and it's not, but it does seem like to have this mean kind of area control, slice off your other people's islands from the rest of the main island, and that looked interesting too. One that I played that's been hot, or I've seen talked about quite a bit coming in, and I got in a full game of this, is a game called Letter Jam. Sean, have you heard of Letter Jam?
No, but sounds delicious.
It's delightful and delicious. Letter Jam is from CGE, who also did Codenames. And in Letter Jam, you are trying to... It's a combination of Hanabi and spelling, is the best way I would describe it. At the start of the game, you have a pile of 5 letters placed face down in front of you. You don't know what your own letters are, but you can see what other people's letters are, one at a time. And so when your letter's up, you're going to try and spell out words to clue other people to what their letter is. They don't know what their letter is. And... your own letter, you don't know what that is, so you're hoping other people will clue you as to what that might be. Spelling using the other letters available. So let's say I saw out there that there was T-R-E-E, and I was trying to clue someone that their letter was R. I have these chips, and you spell out a word in order, so I'd go T, R, I'd put the 2 in front of them for R, and then E-E, I'd put both of those out there. And that would spell out tree, and hopefully clue them that the missing letter is the R, so that they might know eventually that, okay, that's that. You have a certain number of clues you have to get through in order to have everyone get their 5 letters. And then at the very end of the game, you have to unscramble the letters in front of you to form a word. So how this ended up playing out, for instance, was I thought the word in front of me was walls. It wasn't walls, it was something else, but luckily enough, the 2 letters I had wrong ended up making a valid word anyway when things were said and done. Really interesting cooperative game, and I like the twist on the Hanabi mechanic. It felt just a little bit clunky at times, but this was a prototype version, so it's possible that'll all get straightened out a little bit in the final edition. But yeah, that's...
interesting.
Yeah, that's Letter Jam from CGE. And then, let's see. I saw a couple of others that I didn't play. There's one called Pass Tally that seemed to be pretty hot on BGG. That's a kind of route-building, Suro-esque puzzle game. I didn't get to play, but I saw Cartographers, which is a roll, kind of it's not a roll and write, there's no dice, but a flip and fill kind of a game where you're map building in the role player universe. And then Planet from Blue Orange Games I saw, that's a game that's basically a giant D12 that's magnetic, and you stick tiles on the side of it to build a planet. It's a planet building game. So those are some of the highlights in terms of things I played, except for one other thing we will get to in news. Now, keep in mind, Sean doesn't have news in front of him, which is part of why I'm chit-chatting so much. Sorry, Sean.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's fine.
I'm okay.
All right. Let's talk about something Sean is very excited about first, though. So we knew Gale Force 9 had been in discussions to get the Dune license, but now it is official. Gale Force 9 is reprinting Dune ahead of the theatrical release. I didn't know there was going to be a film coming up in 2020 on this.
We didn't talk about this by
we might have.
Villeneuve, and it's got a pretty killer cast.
Yeah,
already set up. Although I will say that Oscar Isaac is tentatively linked to the project, and he's been pegged for the role of Duke Leto, which I think is terrible. I think he should be Duncan Idaho, and then that way, if they make a bunch more movies, Duncan Idaho has a pretty significant role 10,000 years into the future of Dune. But and they keep using Oscar Isaac. But whatever, what do I know? I've just read all the books like 20 times.
Yeah, I got you. This game itself, Sean, I have never played, but this is sort of considered a grail game by a lot of people.
You have played it.
I have? Oh, as Rex?
As Rex.
Oh, well, I didn't like that game.
No, of course not. Why would you like Rex?
Yeah, I didn't. It wasn't an enjoyable experience for me.
It's not your style of game at all.
Well, anyway, I guess I have played it, and I didn't like it. So there you go.
But you'll play Dune with me at a convention because it's Dune.
Will I, though?
Won't you?
I remember you playing a copy of this that was it Chris's print and play version of this?
Yes, Chris Holm does amazing print and play work, and this one was no exception. It's a fantastic copy.
I recall you needing some energy, and that's when you played Happy Salmon for the first time and got the juice you needed to make it through that game.
Yes, Happy Salmon was my spice to get me through that game of Dune.
I should read the second book or something, shouldn't I?
Yeah, the second book is it's a little rough. It reads more like a political manifesto. Really, and even the third book is not. It's not. Well, it is great. Let me rephrase that. I'm making all these comparisons to one another, right?
Yeah.
Like they're all fantastic pieces of science fiction. The fourth book, God Emperor of Dune, is oh my goodness. That's also a political manifesto.
Is that your favorite book?
Is that my favorite book? No, I think I like the fifth book, which is Heretics of Dune.
Okay.
Because there was technically supposed to be 7 books, and God Emperor, the fourth book, was supposed to be the fulcrum point. Mm-hmm. And so you have everything before God Emperor, everything after God Emperor. And believe it or not, the main characters in the last half of the books are the Bene Gesserit.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
I've only read the first one. Woo, blue score. Sorry. Blues leading 1-0. Just getting you a sports update.
And don't read any of the prequels.
Got it.
Or the sequels written by Brian Herbert, his son, and Kevin J. Anderson. Because I'm one of the haters that doesn't care for those.
Got it. Fair enough.
I've read them all, but let me explain this. I've read them all, but I've never bought them retail. I've always bought them secondhand.
I see. Got it. Yeah, take that.
As my little protest.
Take that, Brian Herbert. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, cool. That's Gale Force 9 announcing an official reprint of Dune at GAMA. Glenmore 2, The Chronicles, a game that's on Kickstarter right now, has been picked up by Renegade. Renegade's swooping in, and they are all over the place. I will tell you, the sheer number of different things and projects they're taking on is impressive. Not surprising, just impressive. So,
sure.
Yeah, that's... I've never played... I don't think I've played Glenmore. Have you played Glenmore?
Yes, and I think you would like Glenmore a lot. So, Glenmore, the original one, uses the mechanic where you're all going around on a track, and if you if I move up 3 spaces on the track, then you're able to go behind me up until you catch me, sort of thing.
I see.
Kind of like patchwork.
Okay.
I may be misremembering, because there's different ways that you can do that mechanic, and I may be misremembering things, but it's this idea of I want to jump ahead to get this one thing, but then I give up all of these things behind me.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting tile lane, some cool little combos that you can put together. I'm not too familiar with the differences between Glenmore 2 and the original Glenmore. But I think the first one's a great game, and it's hard to find. It's a grail game for a lot of people. So hopefully the second one will kind of scratch that itch for some.
It's on Kickstarter right now. It's being put out by Funtails. But eventually, Renegade is scooping it up for the U.S. So doing well on Kickstarter, about $111,000 as of the time of this recording. So
nice.
Yeah, so that's Glenmore 2 being scooped up in the U.S. And then the big one, the one that we had gotten a little bit of a heads up on but hadn't talked about, Unmatched from Restoration. This is a reprint of Star Wars Epic Duels. You have sets including Bigfoot versus Robin Hood, and then the big one, which is Alice, Medusa, King Arthur, and Sinbad. So there's a 2-pack and there's a 4-pack. This is a miniatures dueling game, is the best way I can describe it. Not super complicated. They'll eventually have a Bruce Lee one out there with it. It's in partnership with Mondo, who's, I think, best known for posters, as best I can tell, and kind of very nice art. And the art for this game is stunning, as you would imagine, based on the partnership. It would be pretty shocking if it wasn't. So... Sean, had you played Star Wars Epic Duels before?
I had. In fact, I had bought this with my younger brother, and he was too. Hold on. I'm trying to think. Is this the one I'm thinking of? I think it is. At the time, he was too young, and he just kind of used them as little action figures, which, of course, I was totally fine with.
Yeah.
Not at all. And so I don't think So we had it. I don't think we ever played it, like really played it. And then I think he wound up keeping it, and I'm sure it's gone.
Got it. Okay. Well, now you can relive it without the Star Wars theme in this reimagined version that Restoration is putting out. And I got a chance to play this, actually. I got a chance to play this at one of the demo nights at GAMA. I played as Bigfoot up against Robin Hood. The decks are all very thematic. So you have basically a main miniature who, that's the objective. If your main miniature dies, you lose. You also have little sidekicks, though. So, for instance, Robin Hood has bandits, 4 bandits at the start of the game. And Bigfoot has a jackalope, another mythical creature, as a sidekick. So I played as Bigfoot, and boy, oh boy, was I terrible at this game. The mechanic of it is really pretty simple. On your turn, you have 2 different actions you can take. Action number 1 is you can choose to, I think it's called redeploy. There's some name for it, but redeploy or move around, where basically you are moving your folks around up to their space. It can be boosted by cards, and you must draw a card. It's actually one of the basic ways to get cards into your hand. The other thing you can do is can play a certain type of card that has an exclamation mark on it that gives you some cool instant effect. And the third thing you can do is engage in battle, whether that be ranged or melee. And you'll play a card face down, your opponent will play a card face down, you'll flip and resolve and deal damage based on the difference or based on other card effects. Pretty simple system and a decent amount of fun. I certainly didn't know my deck well enough. This is going to be one that I think you have to know your deck better in order to play. But I like some of the things they did with the board. Line of sight in this game is pretty straightforward in that the board, the tiles you're on. So if you're on only the blue tiles, well, you're in line of sight of someone who is also on a blue tile. If you are on a tile that splits blue and brown, if anyone's on blue or brown, they have line of sight on you for ranged combat. Pretty cool how they use those zones on the board. Really simplified, streamlined, and it doesn't have those kind of annoying little rules that a lot of miniatures games have. Because I don't know if I'd call this a true miniatures game, right? You have a miniature on a board space. It's not one of those things where you have that free flowing open table using rulers and protractors and trying to measure different angles kind of miniatures game. So
right.
So yeah, that's Unmatched, and I think that one is going to be very, very hot when that thing comes out. So glad I got a chance to play it, and one I think folks should keep their eye out for. All right, and other GAMA things of note, just a couple small ones. One is, hey, I'm new best friends with your buddy Ellie. Ellie's now my best friend.
I don't know who you're talking about, and you're both dead to me.
Ellie, Sean's friend Ellie happened to be in Reno for business, and so we hung out and had all-you-can-eat sushi, and it was a good time. Good times with Ellie. Good to see him.
Isn't that weird? Isn't that just a weird coinky dink?
I think he may have scheduled it or attempted to schedule it intentionally to be there at the same time as GAMA. To be with you? No, to be there at the same time as GAMA, and I just happened to be there. But yeah, maybe it was to be with me, Sean. Maybe it was to be with me.
Was he able to get into any GAMA stuff?
No, he was not. He didn't have a badge.
Oh, well, that seems like a bad plan then.
No, but he was around, and like I said, you don't need a badge for some of the schmoozier stuff, right? The bars around. And
was he pitching his games?
He was not. He could have, I guess, but no, he was not. But we were at the blackjack table and we were playing with a couple of retailers, and anyway, so yeah. That was cool seeing him. Also hung out a little bit with Dan King, the Game Boy Geek, and I just think this is fun to note. Dan King has no idea what Tinder is.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
He asked me how I knew Abby, my girlfriend, how I met her, and the response to that was Tinder, and he said, I don't know what Tinder is, and that surprised me. So,
well, he's a happily married man, and he has been so for a while, so that makes perfect sense.
Yep. So that is your look at GAMA 2019. I anticipate I'll probably be there in future years, assuming I'm not fired at some point. And yeah, it was a different show than I'm used to, but not as rough as I was expecting. The Pepper Mill, where this is all hosted, is actually pretty nice. So that's a look at the news. Let's head on over to our featured review. So Sean, I like recording the podcast with you, but man, it doesn't feel right if I'm not doing it at a proper table. Right now I'm sitting at this dinky square kitchen table. It's kind of cramped. I don't feel like if I needed to roll dice, they just kind of clank around, and it just wouldn't be a satisfying experience. So I feel like I could use an upgrade.
Oh, well, perhaps a game topper from our good buddy Berkey would be the right solution to your particular problem, Alex.
Is that right? Well, good thing I actually already have one of those fine things.
Oh, perfect.
And really enjoy using it.
So is this a solution to a problem that you no longer have?
When I move in with my girlfriend Abby, it will be a problem I will no longer have because I'll bring this game topper over here and then I'll have that ready to go either when I'm podcasting or chucking some dice or playing games or whatever else. It can convert the benign kitchen table into a fun gaming experience at a nice, affordable price. And if you order now, every single game topper comes with 5 pounds of Berkey jerky.
Ooh, does it really?
No, I actually don't think that's a deal.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't say that.
Would make me more likely to buy a second one, because that jerky, I can't get enough of that jerky in my life.
Mwah! That's all I have to say about Berkey's jerky.
Also, mwah! That's what I have to say about his game toppers. Berkey, you are a mwah kind of guy.
Be sure to check out Game Toppers over at GameToppersLLC.com. So, Alex, do you recall playing the multiplayer worker placement game Yokohama by our fine sponsors over at Tasty Minstrel Games?
Boy, it was so long ago, and yeah, of course I remember. It was an awesome game, Sean. An amazing game.
Yeah, we both enjoyed it quite a bit. So I was excited to hear that Yokohama Duel, which is all the rage nowadays, take an awesome game and then put Duel on it, and now you've got a sweet 2-player game. And I think that's what's going to happen here, don't you?
Oh yeah, no, this looks great.
So this will be coming to Kickstarter in late January of this year, so keep your eyes out for that. Yokohama Duel is a 2-player worker placement game that lasts 4 rounds, with each player taking 4 turns each round. The game includes 10 different areas, and each area can be used only once each round. Workers have certain powers, but they can only be used by people with low power. To gain victory points, players must complete the order form, build shops and trading houses, clear custom goods, and dedicate the church. At the end of the game, whichever player has more points is the winner.
So if you fancy yourself a merchant, you might want to go prepare some funds to invest in a copy of Yokohama Duel, coming soon from Tasty Minstrel Games. Sean, I have so thoroughly mastered the game of Onitama. I can beat all challengers. I cannot be stopped, even by you, even by death itself. But is there anything left for me to do in this game? I feel like I'm so good at it. I just need something more.
Well, Alex, I don't know, because you haven't yet seen my wind spirit.
Your wind spirit?
Yes, my wind spirit. I have a devastating wind spirit, Alex, that all should avoid.
Because the wind spirit gonna mess you up.
All of the New Mexican food, Alex, gives me a ferocious wind spirit.
Well, I don't think that kind of wind spirit is maybe as useful as you're thinking. The wind spirit that comes, though, in the new expansion for Onitama, Way of the Wind, can add some pretty interesting possibilities. It's an impassable piece on the board that can move using certain of the technique cards. Some of those cards will make it very, very, very tricky. You can't move into it, you can't move onto it, but it can move into you, and if it does, it switches places with your piece, and if it does that, it might put you in a pretty vulnerable position. So beware of the wind spirit in Onitama Way of the Wind, now available from fine retailers, from our partners at Arcane Wonders. It was a game that was all the rage at Essen 2018, Blackout Hong Kong. Would this be another smash hit by Alexander Pfister, the multi-Kennerspiel winner? Or would it be a game where gamers simply wanted to just turn the lights out and forget about it? Well, let's talk about Blackout Hong Kong.
All right, Alex, so in Blackout Hong Kong, you are trying to restore power to the different regions of different areas of Hong Kong because there's been this massive blackout. Hey, that's the name of the game. By the way, I'm going to refer to this game throughout the rest of the review as Blackout Murder in Hong Kong.
Okay, interesting.
Is that okay?
Interesting plug.
No? Okay.
That's fine if you want to, I guess.
No, I'm not going to do that. So you are trying to score the most points because it is a Euro game. It's an Alexander Pfister Euro game. And you're going to do that in a couple different ways. So throughout the game, whenever you create whenever you've encircled a region by placing your cubes around it, you're going to score a certain number of points. There's ways for other players to score points if they've kind of helped, not really helped, but if they have cubes on some of those spaces that encircle certain regions, they're going to score points. Anytime that you use your doctor card to bring people out of the hospital, those cards are going to score a certain amount of points. There are some other actions that you'll fulfill, or objectives that you'll fulfill that can also score you points. And at the end of the game, you're going to score points based on a set collection mechanic of scouting tiles that you've managed to get, as well as turning resources into money and then money into points. So that's the main structure of how scoring works. As far as how the game plays, it's going to play over a variable number of rounds. And the first thing you're going to do is from your hand of cards, you're going to lay down as many as 3 cards into different slots below. Everyone flips those over, and then in turn order, you resolve them. So some of them will give you various resources. Some of them will give you special actions. What resources you get is dependent on which card you played and what face the corresponding die has rolled. So there's a red, blue, and yellow die, and there's slightly different distribution for the 3 dice. And so if the blue die is tools this turn, and I play a card that gives me 1 blue resource, I'll get a tool. And so I'll put my cube out on the board to show that, hey, I have 1 tool. However, there's a bit of a rondel with the resources in that I can get, instead of a tool, I can take one of the adjacent resource types if I spend a transport token. Or if I want to go 2 away on the rondel, I could spend 2 transport tokens to get that different resource. So there's a little bit of mitigation there if the dice don't come up with exactly what you need, or if the resource cards you have in your hand aren't exactly what you need. Then there's also other abilities that some of the cards might have instead of just giving you resources. Some of them will give you money, like you start with a card that gives you, I think it gives you $3, and then if you spend a tool, it gives you an additional $5. So that's your mechanic, I think. There are scouts where you could spend money to get help taking the scouting action later. As the game goes on, you're going to be buying new cards. They're going to go into your objective slots. And then once you've completed those objectives, you can take them into your hand. So there's an interesting hand management aspect going on. Once everyone has played out all their cards, the next thing you do is check to see which objectives you've completed. And again, some of them are cards that will go to your hand. Some of them are extra abilities you'll get during the refresh. Man, this game sounds super convoluted as I'm describing it. But that's okay. That's okay. And by completing the objectives, as I said, you're adding them to your hand. Typically, you're spending some amount of resources. Sometimes they want a particular configuration of color cards in a slot of cards that you have. And that's interesting. The next thing you'll do is you'll scout. So throughout the different regions, there are these face-down tiles that will give you certain bonuses and also, again, are part of a set collection mechanic for the end game scoring. In order to take one of the scout things, you'll scout an area where you have a cube adjacent, and you'll look at the 3 tiles, and then you'll have to spend either a lesser amount of points for a lesser reward or a greater amount for a greater reward, and then you get to collect that. So the way it works is you're going to add up any of the scouting tokens that you've been able to acquire, discarding them, and then you also have to basically reveal missing scout points from the people in your hand. The downside is one of those people randomly go to the hospital because it was dangerous going out to scout, and then you might get points, you might get books or water or tools or whatever as part of going out and scouting. Then you are buying the new cards that you could add in, and then once you do that, there's a waste phase that happens where your food spoils, which you can basically sell for money, and water spoils, which you could sell for money or scout tokens. And then you can refresh, or actually, no, sorry. Then you check to see if you've encircled anything to get those points. And by encircling something, you get to place one of your houses from your player board out onto the board, that spot that you encircled. What's the right word? I can't think of the right word.
Secure districts.
Secure. There you go. And then that can potentially give you a certain bonus depending on which thing that you've uncovered during the refresh phase, because the final phase of the round is refreshing, where if you have 4 cards or less, you can pick up all of the cards from one of the stacks. It has to be the stack that has the most cards. And then you could take any available checkmark actions that you have available to you, those coming in the form of houses that you've uncovered. And it's usually changing one resource for something else, or money for points, or a resource for a scout icon, a scout token, or whatever. And then also checkmarks can come from some of the completed objective cards. You do that, go to the next round, and keep doing that until you run out of all of the cards in the deck of new objective cards that people are buying. And then you add up all the points, and whoever has done that is the big winner of Blackout Hong Kong, and boom, you've restored power to the island. That was a really convoluted rules explanation.
Well, it makes sense because of the game.
You've played it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, what was I going to say? Hey, I heard another podcast, and they did a slightly different twist on the review format that I think might prove helpful in future reviews. Let me I'm running this by you on the fly. Are you ready?
Sure.
So instead of initial thoughts where we basically say what we think about the game as a whole, and initial thoughts where we say what our expectations were for the game going in, and then as we talk about it, then the final thoughts kind of bruise up. So it's something a little bit different. It's the expectations going in. What do you think?
Sure, why not?
Okay, let's give it a try. Sean, what were your initial thoughts or your impression of the game before you played it?
I had very high expectations for this game. Incredibly high expectations. Number one, it's a designer who I'm a huge fan of. So he designs all weight of games, but this weight, when it's like a Great Western Trail or Mombasa, huge fan. Huge fan. So I was very much looking forward to this. Things that you had said that you thought I would like this quite a bit. Rory had played this a number of times before I'd played it, and he was like, "Oh man, you're going to love this game. It's going to blow your mind." So high expectations, and I knew that going in, and I knew to kind of temper that to make sure I gave it a fair shot.
Yeah,
because nothing can live up to super high expectations.
So for me, there are certain designers that are insta-buy designers I will absolutely try this game and be excited to do so, because I will be surprised if it lets me down. And those designers include, but are not limited to, Jamie Stegmaier, Wolfgang Warsch, Alexander Pfister's definitely on that list. And I'd probably throw Kane Klenko in there, although I'm not necessarily as in love with Fuse or some of the real-time stuff. So there's and I'll certainly try anything for my good friend Mike Fitzgerald of Baseball Highlights 2045. I'm getting there.
I was like,
I'm getting there. Although I will say the mystery rummy games weren't something that captured me as much as they've captured you and a lot of other people. So
yeah.
For me, there were high expectations about this, especially it being the hotness at Essen. It's a Pfister game. It looks like it has good potential to be thematic. So yeah, definitely high hopes for this one for sure. So that was what I felt going in. So let's talk through the review. Sean, since you don't have the notes in front of you, I know you don't know this, but rulebook is what comes next.
Yes.
How did you feel about the rulebook?
So I got taught the game by Eugene, and had to refer back to the rulebook a couple times here and there. So to be perfectly honest, I don't have a lot of experience with the rulebook, so I think I'm just going to kind of sit this portion out.
You're passing? The rulebook, it was actually pretty decent in terms of learning it. It was well laid out. It was decently colorful for what it needed to be. Woo, 2-0 Blues. All right, Vince Dunn. Nice job, Vince. Anyway, is it Vince Dunn? Anyway, doesn't matter. No one cares.
Anyway.
The rule book, colorful, well laid out, and for a game that's complicated, I thought actually did a pretty good job about teaching you how to play the game. If I recall correctly, I might have learned this one from a video, though, primarily. So sort of a combination between the rule book and the video. It's decently explained to my recollection. So yeah, I thought the rule book did a fine job of taking a game that is potentially tricky to learn and making it not super tricky to learn. So.
Okay.
Components art. This is one that has gotten a lot of chatter on this game before, Sean. More specifically, the art style and the look of it has been something that
let's talk about the art. So I understand fully and completely that the theme of this game is that Hong Kong has a massive power outage and it's dark. It's blacked out. I totally get that. I hate how this game looks on the table. I hate the color choice. I hate the graphic design. I hate how this game looks. I hate it. I can't stress that enough. So basically, the board is black and gray with an occasional orange and then a little bit of color to denote the different nodes that you use to secure the different areas. The cards are mostly black and gray, and then if it's a blue card, a red card, or a yellow card, the art on it, the picture of the person, is instead of black and white, it's black and yellow or black and blue. I get it, right? It's like the colors are washed out because they're in the dark. I get it. I totally get it. I get that's the idea. But I just don't think it works. It just doesn't work.
I will say that I wasn't a huge fan of how it looked on the table either, but I didn't feel... I've seen some really sharply negative comments about this game looking ugly or not looking good, or the graphic design being way off. It's a style for sure, and I know it's not a style that everyone's going to love. I didn't hate this game as much as everyone did as far as the look of it, but I acknowledge that I'm probably in the minority with this just based on what I've seen. There's just a lot of people who really, really, really hate the look of this game.
Yeah. And I'm one of them.
Yeah, I get it. It's certainly a more boring look than would evoke the theme, and I guess I don't know why did they I haven't looked up why this theme got chosen or why it was picked, but I
was wondering about that.
I don't know why, because maybe it was an excuse to have a more boring looking board. I doubt that's actually the case, but
it sounds so. The theme is different, right? It's not. I mean, because this could have been some kind of trading in the Mediterranean or some sort of colonialism game like Mombasa, right? Like it definitely could have been that type of thing, because what you're doing, going to secure areas. It's area control is the wrong word, but this idea of like expanding your network out and encircling things, you could put a lot of different themes on that.
Yeah,
no problem.
Yeah.
I think it's this idea maybe that it's just a different theme than we're used to.
Yeah. We'll talk about the theme a little bit more later on. Was the iconography of this game crisp and clean enough for you?
No, it was terrible.
Yeah.
It's hard to see a couple different things.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, so let me address my biggest problem with the game.
Let's hear it.
My biggest problem with the game is the resource rondel.
And
let me tell you why. Imagine you're playing Terraforming Mars, but instead of having your own resource tray in front of you, you have a shared tray in the middle of the board. I don't understand that choice at all. At all. It's a terrible choice. Now, granted, you don't have as many resources in terms of like the number of units in Blackout that you would in Terraforming Mars, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's not quite a fair comparison, but it's still a pretty fair comparison because it's just, number one, so you're putting cubes out on the different resources, and the dice are on the spots too, and so sometimes it's hard to see what's what, and then sometimes you're nudging other people's cubes, you're nudging your cubes, and there's no real way around it, and it's just terrible. Additionally, the books, oh my God, the books and the gas canisters look exactly alike.
Yeah. Yep.
Exactly alike. And then you have the yellow die with the white print on it, which is hard to read. And then on the cards, it's just not readily apparent because there's no color coding. It's just gray symbols. So when you're looking at the available cards to purchase, it's really hard to read them. So much so, all of this together, the way it looks and how hard it was to figure out what's what from the iconography really, really hurt my enjoyment of the game. Like, made it painful for me to play.
It was rough. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I don't understand the rondel thing. I don't think it would have been that hard to extend the player board a little bit to have that be a part of the equation. Yeah, I think they were trying to be elegant with it, and it just didn't quite work out. It just didn't quite work. I would say this was not the strength of the game. I like the style, but you're right. There's things that just get in the way of playability too much in this game, and I wasn't a super big fan of the components. I would say overall decent quality. I don't know if you had any quality issues with some of the components.
No, I think the card quality was fine. I mean, you've got standard wooden cubes. The board was fine. Yeah, no, it was fine.
It wasn't anything splashy or special, but there were also elements where it just simply detracted from things. So, yeah, that was a bit of a bummer. Gameplay and innovation, that's really the key with just about any Pfister game is how does it play? Does it play in a satisfying enough of a way? Sean, what did you think about this hand management element of the game? Is it? I've heard it was similar to Mombasa. I've not actually played Mombasa.
Yeah, actually, the game in a lot of respects is similar to Mombasa. So there's more of a hand management aspect to this game than there is Mombasa, but it's not. So Mombasa has a similar thing where you're laying cards down to certain stacks, and so that stack management is very similar to Mombasa. And there's some similarities to when you're putting your cubes out on the board, because there's different companies in Mombasa. So ultimately, this feels like, how do I put this? It drew a lot of inspiration from Mombasa, his other, another design of his. And I think that Mombasa is an inherently more interesting game and a better game.
Okay.
And so if there's a similar design space that they're sharing, I'm going to pick Mombasa every time over Blackout.
Interesting.
Mombasa is fantastic. It is a fantastic game.
It's a pretty beefy game too, right? It's considered his heaviest game.
Yes, it is more complex than Blackout Hong Kong, but I think that you're rewarded. The complexity is a bit more rewarding.
I get it. Okay. Well, let's talk about what was rewarding or not about this game. You mentioned that Mombasa is the better version of this, but in terms of this game on its own merits, how did it feel to you?
So I was doing my darndest to get past all of the graphic issues, graphic design, the component choices as far as the rondelle, because I was trying to give this game as fair a shake as I could. But it was really difficult for me. And keep in mind, right? I'm the type of person that doesn't care if a game looks ugly as sin, right?
Yeah.
Like me much more so than you, right?
Yeah, you like GMT games.
Yeah. So to me, it's not just that things looked bad, it's that they were roadblocks in playing the game and in understanding the game and in creating strategy. I mean, it really affected my play experience. So here's what I will say. Here's some of the positives. I like the stack management and also the hand management in this game. I like trying to maximize your actions every turn, but in some ways it didn't feel like you were able to do enough. And in some games that's fine. In some games you like that tension. Here it was a little rough. Here it was hard to plan. I feel like in a lot of ways this is a much more strategic game than it is tactical. And the dice kind of hurt that a bit, because even though you're more likely to roll certain symbols on the red die and you're more likely to roll different symbols on the blue die, they still may not come up the way you think they are. And your mitigation is, again, to spend those transport tokens, which you start the game with 4, and there are ways to get more, but after that, you're basically spending a victory point every time you want to use a token to get a different resource. I don't know. It wasn't particularly satisfying.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's even with me looking past the hurdles from the components and the art and graphic design.
So I had a couple of different problems than you had. I found the stack management part really cool, that you had to have the certain stack set up in a certain way so you could meet different goals. The hand management part of this was really cool. I found that part of the game really engaging, and the hunting around for resources. And I thought there was enough there to be satisfying. It sort of had this power grid element of trying to get better board control and secure different districts and get points that way. Mm-hmm. I liked a lot of that stuff. Where I had problems with the game was it felt like it just dragged on too long. It just felt too long to me. It felt like you were doing the same kinds of things as you were going, and there wasn't really a build-up. Certainly there's a build-up in getting those additional skill actions and those checkmark actions, but it wasn't enough of a ramp-up for me to feel that this was as engaging as I wanted to for the course of the entire game. It was one where probably a round or two before it ended, it could have been over and it would have been just fine. Would have been just as satisfying. And that's problematic for me. I don't know. Did you find the game too long, Sean?
Yes, and I found it to be too short.
Okay.
So well, no, yeah, it dragged on, but at the same time, I felt like I couldn't quite do enough. And then when I felt like I was in a position to build an engine, then the game was over. But I was okay with it being over. And so it's kind of like how I've talked about in Great Western Trail. One of the things I like about Great Western Trail is there's time to build your engine, and then you've got a couple turns to crank it.
Yeah.
Right? This didn't have that. So the game, not that the game ended suddenly, because you can track when the game's going to end, but it just felt like, man, I didn't get to do all the things I was trying to do. And again, sometimes games need to do that, and I'm fine with that in certain games. But in this game, it was kind of jarring. But also, yeah, it dragged on.
Yeah. And it was a bummer because there are so many of the mechanics of this that I found pretty interesting and enjoyable. Trying to use that rondelle in a proper, not from a component standpoint, but just trying to use that rondelle to make sure you had the resources you needed and plan out your turns and the planning cards out. All of that was enjoyable and decently well done. Mm-hmm. But by midway through the game to late in the game, I was just done. I just had enough. So
I thought I remember you enjoying this a lot more.
In different plays, it's gone better. But even in the one play that I enjoyed of it, there was one person who we were playing with who did not enjoy it to the point and did not get it to the point where we had to cut off the gameplay early. We had to cut it off earlier than that.
Okay.
I thought this was one that you would enjoy. I thought this was one that you would really, really glom onto. But knowing that it doesn't compare favorably to Mombasa, I think is bad news for this game as score-wise from you.
Yeah.
So, different player counts, Sean. Which one did you find best, if you found one better than the others?
So I played 4 and I played 3, and the intention was to play to 2 players. But I'll tell you this: I got 2 plays of this in Alex, which is less than I normally will, especially for a game of this weight. And it was because I was so miserable playing this game. 3 was better than 4, but not significantly so. I mean, if I were going to play this again, I'd probably prefer to play it at 3. I did talk to Eugene, who did play it at 2, and he said it was kind of weird at 2. So, I mean, 3 is probably the sweet spot, although 4 isn't that much different.
I'm curious how much this one is caught on in general in the going off of the player count thing. And I by the way, I agree with you. 3 better than 4. Those are the 2 counts that I got it in at. I'm curious how much this one has caught on in the U.S. What kind of sales it's had. It certainly doesn't have the number of ratings you would expect from a Pfister game. Let me do a quick comparison. So this Blackout Hong Kong currently has about 1,000 ratings on BGG. And if I'm going to compare that to, say, what would be a fair one? Mombasa? Let's see if Mombasa's comparable.
I mean, given Mombasa's been out for, 3-4 years now.
Yeah, a little bit longer, but it's usually a pretty good gauge of sales. See, Mombasa is a top 100 BGG game of all time, which you have to have a ton of ratings for that. So 8.4 thousand ratings for that game. So about 8 times the number of ratings. And certainly that one came out a few years ago. So it's possible that that this one will catch up. But we'll see. We'll see. I don't know what the long-term staying potential of this one is. So,
and it's 1.2 points lower in terms of the geek rating.
Yeah. Yep.
Out of 10, which is pretty significant. Yeah, it's ranked 1,011.
Yeah, that's a good ways down. Certainly for and I think some of where this game suffers, right, is in the comparison. You enjoy a game like Great Western Trail. You enjoy a game why am I forgetting this one? Not Glenmore. It's Scottish themed. Why can't I think of this game? Isle of Skye. Isle of Skye.
Isle of Skye.
Isle of Skye. And you enjoy a game like Oh My Goods and Broom Service for me. I like that one a lot better than you did. And this one is sort of, maybe it's that it got caught kind of in between. It's sort of in between one of his more medium weight, lighter weight games and one of his heavier games, Mombasa or Great Western Trail. Maybe that was part of the issue. I don't know, but it just didn't quite totally click. So theme. Let's talk about theme, Sean. Is this game remotely thematic?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think that, this idea of going out to scout, to go potentially get resources, but it's dangerous. That's pretty thematic. I mean, I did talk about how I think it's possible you could have different themes here, but I think with what it's working with, it does a good job. Let me just real quick, since I talked about the scouting.
Yeah.
Man, in terms of gameplay, I hate the scouting. I just think it felt tacked on.
Yeah.
And it felt really difficult to do. And it's not a separate strategy in its own. Because again, there's some pretty sizable endgame scoring points there. And there were some interesting things that you can do. Like I was just setting myself up to constantly go scouting with this one guy because I had built up a bunch of scouting bonuses. And my plan was for like 3 turns to scout with him, send him to the discard or to the hospital, and then use my doctor to get him back to get 6 points because he's worth a lot of points, and then keep doing that. I had it set up so I could use the doctor every turn because I was able to refresh every turn.
Right. But
then the game was over. So maybe that's just not a viable strategy, but I don't know. I didn't like the scouting. Thematically, it makes sense and it worked. And I think there's a lot of design decisions in here that do make sense thematically. So yay, it's somewhat thematic.
For whatever reason, any game where I can break a worker's legs as part of it, I tend to really enjoy that specific thing. I enjoyed it in one of Ryan Lockett's games, Above and Below. I don't know why I enjoy that specific weird little mechanic. And
I have some ideas.
Well, yeah, that's fair. And they're probably right. So yeah, it had thematic touches. I didn't find the objective cards overly thematic necessarily. There were some pieces of them that felt that way, but not as much as maybe intended. It was one of those games that I think mechanically doesn't necessarily need to be completely thematically sound to really succeed. It wasn't a big hit for me though on the theme either. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it either. Kind of in the middle. So before we get to our final thoughts and reviews, let's get to guild thoughts. And we had a couple of them, both of them very, very lengthy, and both of them kind of along the same lines. Let's start with Matt Walker. Matt Walker says,
by the way, I did play our final game with Matt.
Oh, yeah. Well, it shows in this review. I really did not care for Blackout Hong Kong. I feel it has some of the same problems as Great Western Trail in that it lasts a little longer than it should and the end game feels repetitive. But its most grievous sin is the graphic design. There are 10 resources in the game, 9 of which are gray blobs, and the 10th being an orange square with a gray blob on it. The resources are too indistinct from one another, so the game drags a bit as players try to figure out what they have and what they need every turn. Additionally, all players track their resources in a common area, so your markers are constantly batted around as other players reach in to grab their stuff or move everyone's stuff. Because as cubes pile up, they cover up the large gray blob icons in the common area, making it hard to tell what's what. I can't recall any time recently I felt more exhausted and annoyed by a game than I felt after finishing Blackout Hong Kong. I'm a fan of Pfister's card games, but I think his board games are pretty uninspired. I think there's a nut of a good game here. I usually give games like that the benefit of the doubt and rate them higher, but the graphic design choices made here are a serious problem. It is a 2 on the Ducal scale. And that seems, I would imagine, pretty consistent with his experience at the table, Sean.
Yeah, sorry, I meant to say it was our first game.
Okay.
But yeah, I felt the same way. I was exhausted after these plays. And I was just so frustrated. And it's very few and far between where I'm just frustrated.
Yeah, annoyed.
Playing a game. And there are times when I'm exhausted after a game where it's because I was just in the tank trying to figure stuff out, and it's immensely satisfying. But it was just a very frustrated exhaustion.
Gotcha.
So,
speaking of potentially frustrated exhaustion, another person who you likely played this with, Eugene from the game group, also weighed in on the guild. I've only played Blackout Hong Kong a couple of times, but I had a very similar experience both times. Ultimately, I do like the game's hand and resource management systems, but it's all drowned out by the weird, half-hearted attempt at theme. First, everything is black, muddled, and hard to see. I guess that's because of theme, but it feels more frustrating than atmospheric. That's especially because nothing else in the game approaches this level of evoking theme. Second, it's just a repetitive motion of bribing people into your tribe and perhaps securing some nameless districts. None of it seems to ever affect the board state, the other players, or any sense of this blackout. Third, the end is hard to see unless you're constantly counting cards. and it's mostly a result of there being nobody left to bribe. The end comes across more as, oh, okay, instead of, I'm out of time to save this really dark and drab Hong Kong. So is the game building toward a resolution of the Blackout? Well, no. Your endgame points are mostly two things. One, how many cool different things did you find in the street when you sent your peons on missions that always resulted in one casualty? Two, what cool people did you bribe into your indeterminate level of apocalyptic wasteland tribe, minus the losers you callously injured and didn't bother to use your one doctor on? I guess the objectives have some theme in that they are, I gave a farmer some stuff and now they give me food. That said, it's still just cube pushing for more bribe material, and that farmer doesn't really come up until you decide to recall your tribe members. So he didn't give it a score, but didn't seem like a high score off of that.
No.
So I don't think this is going to be a high score from you either, Sean. Why don't you start us off with final thoughts?
Yeah, it's really surprising because I am a huge fan of Alexander Pfister. Let me tell you some scores, right? Isle of Skye is a 5. Broom Service is a 5. Oh My Goods is a 6. Mombasa is a 6. Great Western Trail is a 6. What am I missing?
The pirate game.
The pirate game.
That's a card game. It's a push your luck kind of card flipping game.
Oh yeah. Port Royal.
Port Royal. Yeah.
I think it's Port Royal, not Port Royale. Port Royal. High 4, maybe a 5. So I'm a huge Alexander Pfister fan. I think he's a fantastic designer, which is why it's so painful for on our 6-point scale, a 6 being a great game, all-time contender for the top 10, something like that. 1 being just a horrible bleep show. This isn't a horrible bleep show, but it's a 2. What's a 2, Alex? Game is...
Oh, he doesn't even remember our own scale, man.
Because we don't do 2 that often. I don't have to read 2 that often.
Game has some merit, but has significant issues.
Yeah, and the game does have some merit. I mean, there is a kernel of a good game in here. But I'm gonna choose Mombasa over this. I mean, think about it. Even if this were a 4, right? Even if this game, if you got rid of the graphic design issues, at best it's probably a 4. And if I'm comparing similar design space, this to Mombasa, a 6 to a 4, I'm going to pick Mombasa every time, right? So it's a 2. I mean, it really is a 2. I don't ever want to play this game again. And a good chunk of that, like this probably could be a 3, but the graphic design was this bad that it dropped it at least a point. At least a point.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, that bad. And so I'm shocked. I am shocked to give him a 2. Given the track record, given how much I've enjoyed all of the games of his that I've played. I mean, I told you those scores, right? Those are crazy scores. Like that's a fantastic collection of games,
sure,
as far as I'm concerned.
Sure.
So it's painful for me to give this a 2, but I have to. Avoid this game. If you are a fan of Alexander Pfister, I would recommend avoiding this game.
I was in a bit of conflict about this one, Sean. I was between not much higher than you, either a 2 or a 3. There's elements of the mechanics of this that I really appreciate and enjoy. The graphic design I don't hate as much as everyone else has seemed to, but yeah, the whole grouped resource thing makes the game harder to play. Oh, I don't know. I think there's a chance, not necessarily a big chance, but there's a chance I would play this game again. And because of that, it's going to ultimately get a 3. Game is okay, not exciting. We'll play in the right situation. I think there are elements of the mechanics here that I really find engaging, but it has me want to try Mombasa a little bit more, even though it's heavier than a game I would typically appreciate. I feel like this year at con season, I should try and get in a game of Mombasa.
So actually, I was hoping Wednesday night after we had finished our last play of Blackout, Murder in Hong Kong, to actually bring Mombasa out. And I had pulled it out earlier in the night, and I kind of refreshed myself on the rules. And as I was reading the rules, I was just like, oh yeah, this game is so good. It's a crime I haven't played it more in the last couple of years. So I think I'm going to try and get a game of Mombasa in the next couple of weeks here, because it is super good. And that's ultimately what happened here. I was kind of left wanting after Blackout.
Sure.
So
sure. Especially when you hear the comparisons to a game, I can imagine, wanting to see more of that there. So very good. Well, that's our review of Blackout Hong Kong. Sean giving a Alexander Pfister game a 2. and I'm not much higher, giving it a 3. Before we wrap things up, though, because there's no double take this week, no Duke's double take, we do have to go to the best of the rest names, which normally we would alternate, but Sean can't read any of these, so nope. I'm just going to read all of them. First up is Mike White with Power and Privilege. Power referencing Blackout Hong Kong, and Privilege referencing, I believe, the privilege of being a GAMA, because not just anyone can get a badge to that show. Scott Briance with No Lights, Reno being the city where GAMA is, and No Lights being, well, a blackout. The name father Steve O'Rourke came up with one that I think, Sean, was your runner-up, if not your outright pick, Gamma Rays. So referring to light gamma rays there, and gamma, of course, referring to gamma. Not bad. My favorite, or my runner-up here, would be from Blaine Miley with Pitch Black. Pitch Black referring to it being very dark, but also pitching. People pitching a lot of games of gamma, something that I ended up doing quite a bit during my time out there. And then finally, Nate Simons with the one spot we have reserved for me to sing something, Gamma, 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 Gamma with no neon. Which, again, never going to be the name for the episode, but I always appreciate the chance to flex my singing abilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm sure. You sound very excited about that. Oh, well, that's going to do it, Sean. You made it through without the show notes.
I did. And actually, I could have pulled them up here the last, 15 minutes, but I
slacker.
Didn't feel like it,
Slacker.
Yeah.
Oh, well. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
Well, good deal. That's going to do it for episode 197, Reno 999. I guess you're going to have to jump in and say your first name, Sean. This is pretty weird.
Well, let's do a little role reversal.
Okay.
Let's do it differently.
That's going to do it for episode 197, Reno 999. I'm Alex. Wait.
And I'm Sean. What? You're terrible at this.
Well, you do it. I can't do it justice.
I don't have it in front of me. You can do this. We're gonna do
until
all stated, by the way.
Until next time. This is Sean.
Do it. Well, hold on. Do it with you're Alex.
What?
Man, do it with the episode title.
Okay. This has been
nice and clean.
This has been episode 197, Reno 999. Until next time, this is...
Thanks again to...
Thanks again to everyone for listening and supporting.
No, to who suggested the title. We always mention who said the title.
Thanks again to BJ for naming the episode. Good job, BJ. And until next time, this is Alex.
And Sean.
And Duke you later, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on March 16th, 2019. Our theme music provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out DicetowerNetwork.com. And for all the latest in the Duchy, go to DukesOfDice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsors, Tasty Minstrel Games, Arcane Wonders, and Game Toppers, LLC. You can check out all of TMG's awesome titles at PlayTMG.com. Learn more about Arcane Wonders games at ArcaneWonders.com. And learn all you want to know about Game Toppers at GameToppersLLC.com. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Until then, game on!